70%. Polymarket has the confirmation probabilities of Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., Kash Patel, somewhere in the neighborhood of 70%. As they walk the halls today at Capitol Hill, let's talk to one of the United States senators about where they all stand, the picks for a cabinet of Donald Trump. 2, Caitlin Clark bends the knee to the woke. She says what must be said. She pays her penance. Let's take a little trip around the sun, take a little stroll through hypocrisy. We'll wind our way through, Kash Patel, Jay Bhattacharya, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, and the potential murder in New York City that will tell us it's not just hypocrisy, but it's violence and Marxism. 3, can Pete Hegseth run an organization? We talk to someone on the record about his experience at Concerned Veterans for America. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live, foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Every Monday through Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. Terrestrial radio stations across this great United States of America, but always available by subscribing on Apple or on Spotify. We welcome you in. We welcome you in to the Willisha. What's up, fellas? Tinfoil Pat, Young Establishment James, Two-A-Days Dan. I don't know if you guys in New York saw this. This is a pretty fascinating potentiality. As we talk about the ways that could change here in America, excitement in the air, Donald Trump tweeted out the following. Just yesterday, he said, America's going to start building monuments to our great heroes and heroines again. Signed DJ T. Pretty exciting proposition. The idea that after, some time living through cancel culture and taking down much of America's history, or at least its statues in physical manifestations of honoring our history, we're ready to build it back, baby. We're ready to go back to celebrating America. And it got me wondering, where should we start? What should we build monuments toward? I actually, you guys sent me some suggestions, and I thought this was pretty fascinating. This is a thread. I don't really know who this person is, but Earth Emperor has some fascinating suggestions here about what we should build monuments to, or even past projects that we should pick up that were never quite facilitated. Look at some of these projects. You've got the Ulysses S. Grant Bridge, which would be by the Lincoln Memorial. It's a beautiful looking bridge as it's rendered here. I absolutely think that would be an awesome
be good
memorial
for traffic there too.
Rebuild. I don't know anything about traffic in Washington, D.C., but I like the way it looks, and I want grand things. I want grand things in America. How about a lifelike statue of George Washington standing by the Washington Monument? This has also been rendered. It's
that's
something
awesome.
I guess at one point in
That's
time
pretty epic.
was. Can you just imagine going from very fine people, conversation, which was whether or not we would move on from, Confederate statues to taking down statues of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington to building this, 100-foot tall statue of George Washington. America is back. I like this. I never heard of this. The Mother's Memorial, honoring women's key role on Earth and society. Check this thing out. This is something. I mean, look at the stairs that you would climb to reach this monument honoring mothers. If you're listening on radio or on Spotify or Apple, I mean, this is very like Greco-Roman architecture, and a lot of this is, it's getting away from Soviet bloc, loss of personality, 1950s, 60s, 70s American architecture. I'm always a big fan of Art Deco, by the way. I think it's quintessentially American. So anything that we do, a little bit like Rockefeller Center in New York City, that just feels American. But this Mother's Memorial, I like what it looks like, and I also like the idea. Yeah. And then finally, how about the National Galleries of Art and History? A mile-long, chronological, permanent, and extensive account of all of human history, culminating in the future. And this was something that was presented, I guess, by Franklin Webster Smith in 1900. Can you imagine in 1900, though, where the last wing of that museum might have ended with the future?
Yeah. Oh, my God. We don't build grand
They were
things
probably already
anymore like
considering
that.
flying cars.
Yeah.
But they didn't have any. There's no way that it had anything to do with streaming a show at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, Fox News YouTube channel over something called the internet.
And on your phone that has a touchscreen that's in your hand.
Bing.
Correct. Well, I like this idea. I like bringing some of this in. Some other people had some other ideas for monuments. This was submitted by a guy, goes under the handle Just That Guy, President Trump. I would suggest 2 heroes are needed as monuments in state capitals across the United States. There's a gorilla statue, R.I.P. Harambe, and a squirrel statue, rest in peace, Peanut. Can I just say, fellas, this is concerning to me on several levels. I don't know why the raccoon has been left out of the story of Peanut.
Frank.
There were 2 pets. There were 2 pets there. And see, that's the thing, James. I don't even know. Was he Frank or was he Fred? And that just shows.
It was Frank. Frank the raccoon. Very important.
It's Frank. Thank you. I need to do him the honor of at least getting his name right. It's
How dare
Frank.
they?
Okay, so how can we forget Frank? If we're going to be building monuments to Harambe and Peanut, we might as well remember Frank in a tweet.
It's a huge oversight.
He's not good for
Maybe
search
we'll add
engine
those guys.
optimization.
Maybe we'll add those guys to the rebuilding of monuments across America. All right. We have a big show for you today. A little bit later in the show, we're going to be joined by someone who worked with Pete Hegseth at Concerned Veterans for America. One of the accusations against my former co-host is he has no ability to run an organization and did so poorly at CVA. Well, how about the guy that inherited the organization from Pete Hegseth? On the record testimony today. Yesterday, we had on the record testimony about his leadership in battle in the field of war. Now we're going to get it into running an organization. But I want you to stick around as well because I'm going to be talking to you about Caitlin Clark, who has single-handedly lifted the ratings of the WNBA. But she was vilified because she wouldn't bend the knee to the throne of wokeism. She wouldn't give credit to the women who built the WNBA. She wouldn't pay fealty to black women. Well, now she's been named, I believe it's one of the Time magazine's like People of the Year, but this time she did what she was supposed to do. She bends, finally, to the woke mob. And I think it leads to a fascinating conversation that we have to walk through on what's required of you in society. To walk through a level of unsustainable hypocrisy, and actually an unbelievable level of hypocrisy, from Caitlin Clark to Congressman Jamal Bowman, to Luigi Mangione in New York City, to the treatment of Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr. It's such an unbelievable amount of hypocrisy that the only place you will ever be able to land in the end that is a true embrace of violence under the banner of Marxism. We're going to get into all of that here today on The Will Cain Show. But let us start with story number 1. He is a senator from the great state of Oklahoma. It requires me, against all my native instincts, to call it the great state of Oklahoma, but courtesy, friendship, and neighborliness requires me to call it the great state of Oklahoma from just south of the Red River. It is Senator Markwayne Mullin here on The Will Cain Show. What's up, Senator?
Hey, brother. I just want to join this fight about Peanut and Frank the Raccoon, too. Frank the Raccoon it's not a cool name. It needs to be like Bandit. I mean, Peanut's a cool name. It speaks, right? It speaks to score. If you have something that's catchy like Bandit the Raccoon, they go together because it's not even less of a story. It's just not, I mean, it's like Abraham Lincoln or Abe Lincoln. It has a little bit more grandiose for it, I guess. It rolls off your tongue better. I'm just saying. I think they messed up on the name. Otherwise, he'd be in the conversation.
Did this go into the calculation of being Markwayne Mullin? I think we've discussed this. How you became
it's a cool name.
Is it a 3-name guy? Is it a double first name? But you've managed to give yourself a handle that is memorable with Markwayne Mullin.
100%. Yeah. I mean, Markwayne just like rolls right off your tongue. That's why so many kids are named after me.
Are there any great southeastern or eastern Oklahoma heroes that we're going to need to put on the list? Hopefully they have good handles. They do. I've got a couple nominees. I mean, your eastern Oklahoma heroes that need monuments built to them. How about Belle Starr? The problem is most of them are outlaws. But
Yeah.
you know, or how about we've got guys that have brought the outlaws to bear as well. We've got Bass Reeves. I mean, I think he counts as an Eastern Oklahoma hero.
Bass Reeves
You
is
can build a
well
monument to
known.
Bass Reeves.
There's an outlaw named Christie, Ned Christie, and Zeke Proctor. You got to look those two up. There's towns named after them. I live right there. They were. There's a lot of stories about that there was actually a treaty between. I don't know if it was Ned or Zeke. That there was a treaty that was signed before we could actually become a state because they were still outlaws. And the irony of that is my great grandfather ran around with them. So, you know, but I mean, if you're going to think about monuments, it should be, maybe we start looking at modern day monuments too. I mean, listen, I'm kind of unique here, and my mom calls me baby boy. Maybe we have a baby boy monument. I mean, I'm just.
He nominates himself.
Well, I mean, the statues. So I make this comment to my state legislators because each state gets 2 statues in the nation's capital, but the state legislators are the ones that pick the statues, right? Not us. Our state legislators do that, and they can change them out as often as they want to. Well, Oklahoma has Will Rogers and Sequoia. And I point out to our state legislators every year when I give them a Capitol tour, I was like, guys, I'm just making this point, right? What does Will Rogers and Sequoia have in common? They're both Cherokee and they're from Northeast Oklahoma. I'm Cherokee and I'm from Northeast Oklahoma. It only makes sense that I'd replace them one day. So I'm just in play, man. I'm not, I don't want, my wife's never going to build a monument.
Man,
trying to get somebody else.
If we've learned nothing, you have to be your own champion. You have to be your own champion. You know, it's actually a pretty good segue. I think there's been no better advocate on Capitol Hill for Pete Hegseth than Pete Hegseth. I will give some honorable mention to myself and to you, Senator Mullin. We both understand that this is a person who should be championed as Secretary of Defense. But Pete has done an incredible job walking the halls of the Senate, meeting with senators and making his case. But I do want to give you credit. Obviously, I'm a supporter. I'm biased. I own my bias with the audience, but I've also explained why I'm biased. But you were in pretty early on Pete Hegseth, and I'd just like to know why. Why is that a position you felt important to take, supporting Hegseth?
You just go with, I didn't know Pete really outside of, I've been on his show a couple times. So I didn't have the privilege of getting to know him like you do, but I start looking at what we have right now. We have Secretary Austin, who was a general in the Army, and he's been an absolute disaster. I mean, we have had issues ever since he's been in office, from the withdrawal from Afghanistan to what's happened in the Middle East, and you continue to the morale issue we're having, to the DEI crap that he put in place, to the way he handled COVID when he got in. And now you're seeing recruiting numbers that they're not able to meet. And then they say, oh yeah, we're able to meet them because they lowered the amount of people that they're trying to recruit. Is the only reason why they're able to meet them now. And I thought, here you have Pete. The guy knows how to articulate a message. He can get people's attention because he is, I mean, I'm not into him, but he is somewhat attractive of a guy. So he draws an audience, and which is important, Will, which is why, they have you on, the internet rather than national TV. I'm just saying. And I'm being mean there, by the way, if you're catching it. But he's, and then you have a guy that served 20 years in the service. He's a combat veteran. He's decorative, 2 Bronze Stars. The guy's lived a life. He's fought his demons, and now he's successful in his marriage and successful in life as a whole. Who you tell me who's going to be able to relate best, Secretary Austin or Pete, when you start thinking about the guys that's going to respect you? The guys that are going to respect us, to keep us safe every day, are not the guys in the Pentagon. They're the guys downrange. The shooters have been forgotten about. The guys that are demonized sometimes when they have to make a split decision in the middle of combat. The guys that they have attorneys that have to deploy with them so they can explain the situation that they were in. The guys that are having to second guess their movement, yet we expect them to go out and fight our fights for us. Pete gets it, and he'll put the war fighter first. And for a guy who's been downrange, a guy who's understood that, who's worked beside these guys before and in a past life, soon as I saw Pete getting there, who's going to be a complete different approach, I was like, yes, thank God, let's go. And then the one when I had the opportunity to get to know him, and we sat down and we talk like old time friends. He's relatable. He's somebody that you enjoy being with. And he's extremely passionate, and you can't get a better hunter. What I mean is, the dog hunts. That's the terminology we use in Oklahoma. You can't get a better person than someone that's bred for it. And he knows it. He's been on both sides of it now. And as I'm telling you, I was all in from the get go. And the more they go after him, the more I just walk into the fight with him, because I think they're afraid of him. And that's why they're trying to bring him down.
It surprises me none at all, Senator, that you and he would find each other relatable, knowing both of you to some extent that you guys would find some spirit of commonality. By the way, I just saw this, and I think it's fair to say you and I have hit it off, having never met in person, but I just saw this comment come in. Mango Kennedy says, I'm watching live for the first time. I love Pete, but Will Cain looks like a liberal to me. Haha, sorry, Will. I love you. You do a good job. I do understand. The funny thing about it is, that's not the first time I've experienced that kind of comment. I don't know what liberal look I give off, but I'll acknowledge I don't have a Markwayne Mullin beard or a Pete Hegseth red, white, and blue jacket liner, but I think I can relate to the Senator and Hegseth, even if I look like a lib.
Yeah, it's the plaid shirt and the perfect hair. I mean, I guess that's just what it is.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing with the person at all, but I know you better than that. But I mean, I just don't disagree with the statement.
That's the plaid shirt. I have to figure out I'm going to get my starched white, button down on and my big belt buckle, which I do wear on occasion. Just
there you go. This occasion. But I bet you were pointed.
I want to go back to Hegseth in the confirmation process. I appreciate what you have to say. As I was saying, it doesn't surprise me you two would find each other. You'd be able to relate. There is an element of surprise with you in that, I think it's fair to characterize you as a bit more hawkish than maybe even I have been. And you and I have had a few conversations. I wouldn't characterize them as debates, but we've had an exchange of ideas, for example, when it comes to Ukraine. Now, Pete's pretty hawkish and he goes back and forth, but I think he's very prudent on the use of military force from the American military. But the point is, you could have gone into that with a great amount of skepticism, but you didn't. What you did was you were ultimately won over by Hegseth. Do you think your colleagues are being won over, even the holdouts, people like Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa?
Yeah, Joni's moving, but I give Joni some credit here. You got to understand sexual assault. Why this isn't? Pete was falsely accused of it, and it was clear who the aggressor was if you read the report. I mean, if you read the report just yourself, without even talking to Pete, you just read the report, it's very clear what took place and why the police did not pursue it other than just the initial report. But you got to look at Joni. Joni is a victim of sexual assault. She's always taken that as a point of interest, and every confirmation hearing I have been with her in, she's always brought this up as a concern of something that is passionate about her. I don't think for a second that she's not going to get to yes on Pete. I believe Pete is going to be confirmed. He's going to be our next sec def, but you got to give Joni the respect to go through the process. Remember, not a single person has said no to Pete. Not a single Republican. I mean, no one's no. He's doing exactly what he has to do by taking the fight to each office. It's not about putting yeses on the board. It's about keeping the no's off the board. And those are difficult because the yeses are the easiest meetings. The no's are the ones that are tough. And that's where he's spending all of his time. He's already had 2 meetings with Joni, and Joni's never been a no, but she's expressed concerns. He is here in the halls every single day, and his poor wife, who is just beautiful and standing beside him each day, she's walking with him, which I think is a brilliant move because she's in those meetings. She's hearing the tough conversations. Pete will be the first one to tell you that he wasn't the greatest guy in the past, but he is who he is today. And you got to take that. We've
Yeah.
all got to pass. All of us have got to pass. The first person that wants to cast that first stone is like Jesus writing in the sand. You know, cast the first stone, and who knows what he wrote? But I know everybody walked away. Or the one that's pointing out the speck in someone's eye when you got the plank hanging out of your eye, right? So people are kind of hypocritical when you start bringing up his past, because the past is who we are, but it also makes us who we are today too, because if we learn from it, which he's admitted about some of that stuff, it makes you stronger for who he is today. So when you sit down and you talk to him, he's open. He's a 100% open book. And by not running from that, but understanding and explaining where he was at, he's won over hearts of the Senate one at a time. And you cannot express that enough. Now, talking about our differences in some of the decisions that we made from Ukraine or some other stuff, you only get the knowledge that you're privy to. If you're wanting to dig in, there's only so much information that you're able to get. When you get in certain positions like JD or even Tulsi Gabbard or even Pete is going to be in, when you start getting some different reports that unfortunately not the Republic, but the public doesn't get, and you're starting to see some of the much bigger picture, because you're starting to get classified stuff that's coming out at TS and above levels, and you're daily getting the briefings on it, and you're understanding every aspect of it, not just what you're seeing play out in the public. Your perception changes, and you're making those decisions at that point. I will guarantee you, when Pete gets in and he's getting those briefings on a daily basis, him and I are going to line up on the decisions, because we're going to come from a same point of view. And I'll
be the one
about it. And I would be willing to say too.
Well, I'll be the one. Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd be willing to say if I could share with you the classified information that I have to deal with on a daily basis, knowing you would sit down and you'd read it and you'd come to probably somewhat of a different conclusion. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to go at it the same direction, but I guarantee you we'd want the same result. The decisions, there's a lot of decisions of which way you can go, but the end result is what we're looking for. And that's where we're going to be lined up on. Pete and I will be lined up on the same end result too. At the end of the day, we may have some different decisions, because we will look at it, we'll process the information different. But either way, hopefully it doesn't come to that, because I believe what what he said he's going to do, he's going to bring an end to that war, because he has a leverage point from both perspectives. He can leverage Ukraine, and we can leverage Russia from a point of strength. The Biden administration could never do that. So negotiations and what we do moving forward looks drastically different from my decision perspective come January 20th.
Well, I appreciate what you had to say, not just about Pete Hegseth, not just about my plaid shirt, but also about what I would know if I were involved in some more classified briefings. What I'll make this promise to you and everybody watching as well is that even though I like you, and obviously I like Pete a lot, I'll hold you guys accountable where I disagree. But I'll also be someplace that I'm open to hearing what I'm wrong once we get to that point. And it'll be always a venue for you or Pete or anyone else to tell me where you think I've gotten it wrong. You bring up some other people that I really do want to ask you about, though. You brought up Tulsi. I want to ask you in particular, Senator, about Tulsi, where you will be on her. But then I also want to ask you more broadly when it comes to Tulsi and RFK and Kash Patel, maybe those three in particular. Are you confident that, like Pete Hegseth, they will receive consent advisement and consent to confirmation for Donald Trump's cabinet?
I do. I think everybody that we got right now, unless some October surprise, I'm using a political term, comes out on them, I believe everybody we have right now that's been nominated by the president will get confirmed. I feel that confident. Tulsi is a extremely close friend of mine. In fact, she'll call you or she'll call me her brother, and I call her my sister. We have been extremely close. Our families are very close. She's close with my wife. I'm
there
close.
We go.
Her husband Abraham was actually at their wedding. My wife and I and a whole slew of us was at her wedding in Hawaii. I mean, her sister and brother-in-law are the greatest people in the world. They're former U.S. Marshals.
Well, can I just interrupt you for just one moment? I didn't know that about your personal relationship with Tulsi Gabbard. And one of the reasons I was curious about your perspective on Tulsi then, and I think this only makes me more curious, is here we have the intel officials, running out information concerned about her being a Russian asset or whatever it may be. It's curious, when it comes to intel officials. I also heard 51 intel officials tell me that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. So trust me, I give it about the amount of credibility that it serves as a paperweight. But, again, I didn't know your personal relationship, so I was curious about which way you would go. And so now I'm curious, what do you have to say about all those people lining up in that way against Tulsi?
I get asked that question every day, multiple days in the hall about her being a Russian asset. And what I remind people, I was like, okay, she went to Syria in 2017. She was a captain in the National Guard. She's now a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. She's over the reserve unit of Oklahoma and Missouri. I'm pretty sure if she was a Russian asset, she would have never been promoted and still wouldn't be able to be in the United States Army. So you're telling me that they haven't done a background check on her? You're telling me that she's good enough to be a lieutenant colonel and be up for a colonel the next? I mean, and she probably won't now, but she was on her path to make 06. And now you want to come out and say she's a Russian asset? Give me a break. That doesn't fly. There's nothing about that makes sense. And I'll tell you, the idea of her being the director of DNI, when we were first discussing this among the team and among her, I was so excited because DNI is such they have become the largest bureaucracy. That's where all intel goes to die. Now, remember when it was first stood up, that was after 9/11. A lot of people don't realize this, that the Director of National Intelligence was stood up after 9/11 because each agency there's 17 plus different alphabet agencies, but let's just say the two that people know is the CIA and the FBI. They were so siloed that every one of them had information on what bin Laden was doing, but they weren't sharing. So DNI was stood up to that. The intel is supposed to flow through them and make sure it mashes up so the President of the United States and Congress gets a full picture. What's happened with DNI is that's where everything goes to die and all gets redacted. And since then, Congress never gets actually an intelligence briefing. You have to go read it, but you'll never get a briefing. Everything we get briefed on is actually already out in the public. And Director Haynes has done a horrible job being there. Two things that need to happen. Either DNI needs to be completely reformed or they need to be dissolved. And Tulsi is a no-nonsense, non-emotional individual, will just do what needs to be done to get the job right because she loves America individual, and she will do it. And so when the conversation first started for her to be director over at DNI, I was like, both hands, heck yeah, she's a person we need to clean that agency up.
All right. I want to be respectful for your time. You have to be somewhere at 12:30 Eastern time. You can get up from your chair and walk away from your camera. And that's how we do it on the Will Cain Show.
Minutes. Yeah, I can spread 10 minutes if you need me to. I can push everything if you need me to.
Oh, I'm grateful to hear that. But I will. So, okay, then let me just fit in one extra one. Do you feel like RFK will get confirmation as well? Again, there's 53 Republican senators. So the truth is, Donald Trump could have the cabinet that he wants as long as Republicans confirm his nominees. Will he, for example, will RFK get 53 senators, Republicans?
I don't. A lot of these are going to get 53. There's going to be some of them that won't get 53, and just the politics behind this. Okay, Susan Collins, she's from a very tough state. Trump has no chance to win Maine, but she's able to carry it. We're never going to get another Republican elected from Maine. And regardless of what Susan Collins, a lot of the listeners think about Susan Collins, she still votes with us 80 to 85% of the time, where a Democrat's going to vote against us 100% of the time. So you kind of got to take your wins and loses there. She may have to vote different on some of these nominees, but that's okay because she's got to also represent her state to some degree. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Bobby. Bobby is someone that I didn't know. Tulsi and Bobby became pretty good friends. When I was asked to start traveling, Tulsi and I were traveling together. Bobby started traveling with us. Then we started working with the president and being in his motorcade. And I spent a lot of time with Bobby. First of all, Bobby's a brilliant individual. And his stance on vaccinations and on the food and his whole pledge about making America healthy again, that comes from a very personal perspective of his. And he has the data and the knowledge to back it up. And you should have him on your show sometime because he is the most interesting guy you'll talk to. But he's also extremely funny. I've never heard better Irish jokes from anybody than Bobby. And we spent hours together in the motorcade or on the plane. And I just got all the respect from him. He's going to do the same thing that Pete is doing, the same thing that Tulsi's doing, the same thing that Kash is doing. He's going to bring that same personality, that same knowledge, that in-depth knowledge, and be able to answer people's concerns as he walks into one office at a time. And he's going to walk out of there with their support because they're going to come to the same conclusion I have about all these noms. Keep in mind, the President of the United States gave Congress, especially Republican Congress, meaning House and Senate, to change the way government is working and get government working for them again, not for a party. He's putting those people in place that's going to change things. He's going from the cabinet to the White House to the Senate. We have a mandate to change the direction of the country, and everybody he's got nominated is able to bring in those changes, which is why the establishment up here is pushing back so hard.
Right. Yes, and you only get change through disruptors. That's going to bring me my final question. We'll see, by the way, if any of these nominees lose Susan Collins, there'll be a real curiosity on whether or not they'll pick up, for example, John Fetterman to vote for some of Trump's nominees. You have said today, which I agree with, that Bobby Kennedy will do a great job, as Pete Hegseth is doing a great job, of walking these halls and taking these meetings and showing these senators who they are and winning them over. There is a bit of a bad cop to this as well, in that there are a lot of people very upset, for example, Senator Joni Ernst, that she would take up this cause. I totally respect what you said about her and sexual assault. I hope that's not what's really driving. I mean, in the end, I hope that she wouldn't take the word of, false reports or anonymous sources from NBC over character witnesses on the record and what is clearly, as you pointed out, investigated and cleared incident when it comes to Pete Hegseth. There are other people that suspect there were, at least at one point, other motivations for Joni Ernst. I do believe you have said, Senator, you do not think she should be primaried. That's the other side of this coin, that if she doesn't do this, she won't be a senator much beyond 2026. But I do want to ask you, because I saw you say, I don't think that should be the political, you said, I believe, you don't think that should be the political price to pay right now for Joni Ernst.
Yeah. I agree with that. Joni is doing her due diligence. She's everybody says obey the Constitution. You're sworn to uphold the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2 is very clear that we have oversight here, right? I mean, we have to consent and approve these individuals as they move forward. And Joni's doing the oversight that she needs. Just because she hasn't came out, yes, it's not unusual for a lot of senators not to tell you their position. That is actually something that drives me nuts. I'm one of these people, you'll know where I stand. I promise you. I don't hide from that at all. And it causes rift, but just because she hasn't came out and supported him doesn't mean he's not going to come support him. And so people jump to conclusions because she's doing her due diligence by asking the tough questions, and Pete's doing his job by going and meeting with her. Doesn't mean that we need to be thinking about priming her. She is a good member of the Senate, and she works with Republicans. You can look at her voting record. She's there with us. I don't know her voting record, but I'd say she's there with us 99% of the time, maybe 100% of the time. And so you got to take everything in perspective. Sometimes we get so dug in as Republicans, the first time you don't agree with us, you're a rhino, you're a sellout, and we're going to primary you. Well, we all make decisions differently. If that was the case, my wife would have divorced me 100 times over. Sometimes we come to conclusions in a different way, and we need to look at the history of the back and look at things moving forward and not just look at today. And I think if you'll go and you'll look at Joni, you'll understand she's a true-blooded, bleeds red, patriot Republican, and puts America first. And that's why I caution everybody to be cautious about moving forward. The ad that was ran against her, I disagree. Now, what she does moving forward, you're welcome to judge her on that. But just on this one case, make sure you look at what's backwards and then see what the final outcome is. I think she's yes on Pete at the end of the day.
All right, well, we'll get to work. It shouldn't take long. We could probably carve it out of wood, stick it in the forest. Nobody will see it, but a statue to Baby Boy somewhere around Broken Bow or something like that. I don't know. You want it in northeastern Oklahoma, I think.
Whatever.
I was in Broken Bow for Thanksgiving, by the way. It was real big of me to cross the Red River, but I was up there.
Sure. Yeah. So, and
Okay,
one
northeast
thing
Oklahoma.
Remember, Joni will be, or not Joni. Yeah, Joni will be part of the hearing we'll have for Pete in the committee June 9th. Or June 9th,
Okay.
January 9th. January 9th.
January.
So right the first week we're back in, we will be with that. I think it's on a Thursday, June 9th or January 9th is a Thursday. We're going to have a hearing. That's going to set up his confirmation vote for maybe as early as June 21st. And I would encourage people, if you're really interested in this, even though to watch a hearing is like watching paint dry, but if you actually are interested in where Joni's going to be, she'll be up pretty quick on the dais because she has seniority in the committee, and ask her questions and just listen to how she answers how she asks her questions and how Pete does. Because as I said, I believe she's yes. And I believe we're wanting to get Pete confirmed quick. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the first ones we actually confirm too on a vote.
Really? That's interesting information. That's worthy of me thinking about and breaking down. I always enjoy having you on the show. Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma, thanks for being on the Will Cain Show.
Thanks, brother. Talk to you later.
All right, there he goes. I just want to say three things really quickly. I totally respect that Joni Ernst has a history that she wants to make sure that there's never a situation where someone who would be guilty of sexual assault finds their way to the highest levels of American government. If that's her motivation, then take your time, figure it out, but ultimately arrive at the truth. I hope that's her motivation. I hope it's not that, she hoped for that position herself, and that was her opposition to Pete Hegseth. Second, I think that's fascinating information we just got from Senator Markwayne Mullin about those hearings come January 9th, and that she'll be up first, and he's encouraging everyone to watch. I think he respects Joni Ernst, and I think that's an honest respect. I would have asked him this, and maybe I will next time. My suspicion he's friends with Joni Ernst, and there's a lot of collegiality up there in the Senate. And I bet you Joni Ernst is looking for an opportunity for a landing on this Pete Hegseth deal, that she wants to be on the right side of this. She wants to vote now for Pete Hegseth. And that hearing, if they're wanting to draw attention to that, will be an opportunity for Joni Ernst to get, honestly, back on the right side of this thing when it comes to Hegseth. And then three, guys, before we go, New York, let me just go back to this one more time. Why do I look liberal? Fellas in New York, this is from Mango Kennedy on YouTube. I'm watching live for the first time. I love Pete, but Will Cain looks like a liberal to me. It's kind of weird, two-a-days and young stuff. It's weird that this doesn't surprise me.
I know.
I actually kind of get it.
I see it.
But I can't articulate it. I can't figure it out why I look like a lib.
There's a crossover with the shirt you're wearing and what some of the hipsters of Brooklyn might. Is that right?
I have a theory. You know how this cosplaying as cowboys is a big thing with the hipsters now? I think that's why. I think because you're an actual cowboy.
That I'm cosplaying cowboy?
No. You're an actual
That I'm cosplaying cowboy?
No, you're a Texan. You're a real one. But the other people are.
Oh.
So it gets looped in.
Because
so you're getting looped in.
What I am authentically is a thing that libs are cosplaying in Brooklyn.
Exactly.
Now I look like the libs cosplaying instead of what I really am.
That's what I think it is.
You just wore golf shirts, it would never happen.
You know what I think it is? I think it has something to do with my face, and I just can't put my finger on it. But we might have more theories, and we'll work through those today here on the Will Cain Show. Don't go anywhere. We want to talk about Caitlin Clark bending to the woke mob. And I promise you, this little walk's going to take us through Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, and Luigi Mangione. It's not just hypocrisy. It's underlying violence driven by Marxism. Coming up on the Will Cain Show. Have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? Well, I recently saw a video he made, and I was shocked. He's in his 80s. He's still kicking butt, working out, and staying active. What's even more shocking is he's stronger, can work out longer, and even has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this by just making one change. He says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife even started doing this one thing too, and she's never felt better. She says she still feels 10 years younger. Her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. Chuck made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it. You can go to chuckdefense.com/Cain or by clicking on the link below this video right here. Once again, if this will change the way you think about your health, in order to do so, you just got to watch this video, chuckdefense.com/Cain. Click the link in the description below this video. You won't believe how simple it is. It's a reminder, Chuck Norris, legend, 84 years old, and yet has more energy than me. He discovered he could create dramatic changes to his health simply focusing on 3 things that sabotage our body as we age. Watch his method by clicking on the link in the description below. And that is, again, chuckdefense.com/CAIN. More Will Cain Show coming up. All right. It's a shame. She's driven ratings to historic standards in the WNBA. She did it by just being a basketball player, standing on her own 2 feet, building her own career, and not giving in to what everyone else required of her. But now she's bent the knee. Caitlin Clark. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or join us every Monday through Thursday, 12 o'clock Eastern time, right here on Fox News YouTube. Here's the headline from Outkick. Talks about what's just went down. Fans turn on Caitlin Clark after she predictably bent the knee to the insufferable woke mob. I don't know how it was predictable, except that it's what's required of everyone. And eventually, everyone bends the knee. Caitlin Clark said in an article with Time Magazine, apparently, I want to say I've earned every single thing, but as a white person, there is privilege. A lot of those players in the league that have been really good have been black players. This league has been kind of built on them. The more we can appreciate that, highlight that, talk about that, and then continue to have brands and companies invest in those players that have made this league incredible, I think it's very important, and I have to continue to try to change that. Nothing about what Caitlin Clark had to say here, is offensive or outrageous. It's just a surrender. It's a white flag. This idea that the league has been built on the backs of black women ignores the fact that the league has been a historic failure until the arrival of Caitlin Clark. It's just a fact. I mean, it may have been primarily populated by black women who can play basketball, but the ratings and the fandom and the profit loss of the WNBA is an abject, undeniable, objective failure, subsidized by the NBA. In comes Caitlin Clark, ratings soar. And it's more accurate to say the league has now been built on the back of Caitlin Clark. But of course, she can't say that, and nor should I, if I'm attempting to be politically correct. No, you have to say what now Caitlin Clark has said. And she has been ostracized. She's been bullied. She's been physically attacked during games because she was unwilling to say what she has now said. She waved the white flag. She said what was required of her. Just know that surrender isn't a finish line. Surrender is a journey. It's like this confirmation process for Donald Trump's nominees to his cabinet. You fold on Matt Gaetz, they're going to require you to fold on Pete Hegseth. You fold on Pete Hegseth, you're going to have to fold on Tulsi Gabbard. And if you fold on Tulsi Gabbard, you're going to be failing on RFK. Retreat and surrender are a journey, not a finish line. So every time you wave that white flag, just get used to it because it's going to be your new banner. Speaking of race, I want you to look at this from Congressman Jamal Bowman of New York. After the verdict in favor of Daniel Penny, he wrote a tweet, a missive, a little bit of a manifesto. He's an outgoing congressman from New York. And he wrote a Dear White People tweet. I think we have it. We can put it up for you to take a look at here. But it's quite the long thing that he wrote. We may not have it here to pull it up for you. But he told white people that he was hoping for them, but he was making a plea, still hoping that they would come together. But he was beginning to lose some hope. Here it is. Here's what he had to say. Dear white people, I don't know why I feel the need to keep talking to you. I don't know why part of me still has hope for you and for us. Some of you are too far gone, but maybe enough of you aren't and will join in fighting to end white supremacy. There's nothing to take away from this, nothing absolutely at all, except for the overt racism by Jamal Bowman. I think it's enough overt racism to actually make a character indictment combined with personal past history that he is a racist. Soon to be former Congressman Jamal Bowman. But I was talking about this white flag of surrender and the hypocrisy that requires you, walks you down the path of it becoming your banner. Do you remember this from a little bit earlier in the week? We talked about this. Look at the Intel execs that have come out against Tulsi Gabbard. She begins her meetings this week on Capitol Hill, right? I find this fascinating. This is the NBC News headline. Nearly 100 former national security officials alarmed at the prospect of Gabbard leading the Intel community. Now, I remembered that technique. I'm sure you do too, so I'll serve as your alarm or your reminder. It's the exact same thing that was said about Hunter Biden's laptop. However many former national security advisors and CIA and deep state intelligence officers dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop as Russian disinformation. And now we hear them lining up. I don't know if it's the same Venn diagram overlay here, but same exact playbook against Tulsi Gabbard. And oh, by the way, also now against RFK, because, hey, once you got a playbook, if you can run the ball, don't stop running the ball until they stop you. So they're going to run the ball straight into RFK as well. Take a look at this headline. It's the number of Nobel laureates lining up now against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. 77 Nobel laureates. Who knows what Academy of Science warns Senate against confirming RFK Jr. for health secretary role. It's just so brazen, blatant, in your face, open, this double standard that they apply. Here's a great example. I'm talking about the way they treat their nominees versus the way they treat the nominees of Donald Trump, right? So Pete Hegseth wins 2 Bronze Stars, and the Washington Post runs an article about how common and unimpressive they are, Bronze Stars. But Joe Biden awards a soldier Bronze Stars, and you can read the same exact publication, Washington Post, talking about how amazing it is that he awards Bronze Stars. How about this? Have you heard this story once? I'm going to ask you that as you're listening and watching. Have you heard this story once? I'm going to give you a hypothetical headline. First Indian American nominated to lead the country's FBI in its history. Probably haven't heard that, but it's true. How about Kash Patel? Look at this. He's not the only one. How about Jay Bhattacharya? I want you to read you this tweet I saw. Kind of weird. Let's put that up. Kind of weird that Jay Bhattacharya is named America's first ever Indian American FBI director, and the media hasn't celebrated this historic first. No articles about his boyhood, his favorite Indian foods, photo shoots, magazine covers. Don't know what to make of it. Jay Bhattacharya, NIH director. Same thing with Kash Patel. None of those articles about, his favorite Indian foods, his upbringing, son of, grandparents or parents that are immigrants. He will be the first ever Indian American FBI director. Can you imagine the magazine covers? Can you imagine the television profile puff pieces? Were this to happen under the administration of Joe Biden? What is the difference? Capital D, capital D, capital D. What is the difference? And finally, that takes me to this. The story we talked about yesterday. Luigi Mangione, the accused murderer of Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare. Hypocrisy only goes so far until it reveals an underlying truth. Right now, what we're seeing are people like Taylor Lorenz, formerly of the New York Times and the Washington Post, basically celebrate the murder of Brian Thompson. There's a TikTok trend and videos out, people supporting Luigi Mangione. And I think it's interesting who they are. These are people who are not from the streets. It's not the pitchfork rising of the masses. It's not a class warfare. It's not the voice of the poor. These are the private school kids like Luigi Mangione, $40,000 a year, the valedictorians. These are the people that have lived a life of privilege and merely wealthy, and for some reason look at Brian Thompson as the truly rich. And for that, there's no bigger envy, no bigger hatred, no bigger hypocrisy. And that hypocrisy, I think, reveals that it isn't just hypocritical. I thought this tweet was amazing. So you're telling me Luigi Mangione, son of multimillionaires, educated at elite $40,000 a year private schools, then Ivy League University, UPenn, executed Brian Thompson, the son of a working-class grain stock laborer in Iowa who attended an in-state university and then spent 20 years in the private wealth trenches, eventually working his way up to CEO at United Healthcare because he is a parasite? We're making the wrong man an American sex symbol. Brian Thompson deserved better. It's true. And these same people now celebrating and making a hero out of Luigi Mangione, by the way, I would bet you would tell you they're against the death penalty or have probably marched in the opposition to the atrocities in Gaza. So they're not anti-violence. They're not peaceniks. It's not really hypocrisy. It's just a mask for something underlying that is ugly and violent. And ultimately, yes, this is true. It's not just a cudgel. This is true. They want a class warfare, which is not driven from the bottom up. Class war never was. It wasn't in the Soviet Union, and it won't be in America. It will be driven by the bourgeois, the upper middle class, because they're envious of the truly wealthy. And so that violence that underlies, that is underneath the mask, is driven by Marxism. Pete Hegseth has been a subject here on the Will Cain Show for quite some time. He's, of course, my friend, but in the past couple of days, we've had people that interacted with Pete at various walks of his life. Yesterday, we had soldiers on, guys that served with Pete Hegseth, and testified to the type of leader he is in the theater of war. Well, one of the controversies that's also swirled around Hegseth is his leadership at Concerned Veterans for America, an accusation that he doesn't know how to manage an organization that left it penniless and out of shape. Well, today, we're joined by somebody who can address exactly that. It's the man who took over Concerned Veterans for America after him. His name is Mark Lucas, and he joins us now on the Will Cain Show. Mark, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Will.
I think we have Mark's audio. I hope we have it. But I'll go ahead and ask you a question, Mark. Let's make sure we're working out those technical difficulties, if we have any, as we go here. But, Mark, I want to ask you, did you take over Concerned Veterans for America? And when you did, was it in awful shape, as I have been told in the media?
I was able to inherit an incredible team at Concerned Veterans for America from Pete Hegseth, his executive team, his strategy. We were able to accomplish two of the most historic reforms in the history of the VA. And that was thanks to Pete Hegseth. I was telling a story the other day that I was able to brief President Donald Trump on Pete Hegseth's plan. I literally walked in to the Oval Office with the Fixing Veterans Healthcare report that Pete Hegseth wrote. And I told President Trump that the VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act would be critical for us to bring accountability to the VA. I also told him about Pete Hegseth's strategy of how we need to bring choice to veterans health care. I believe that if you served overseas in a combat zone, and if you can't get great care at a VA facility, you should be able to drive across town and go to a private facility. So the New Yorker released this report based off of anonymous sources. Well, I'm on the record. I'm here on the Will Cain Show, and I'm also willing to testify in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee on the character and the fitness of Pete Hegseth for our next Secretary of Defense.
What about one of the reasons? I mean, the attacks on Pete Hegseth at this point are multitudinal. They're coming at him from every angle. But what I think you have the ability to address here today is one specific angle of attack on Hegseth, and that is that he's never managed an organization as large as the Pentagon. By the way, who has before they do that? And that his history of managing very small organizations suggests he doesn't know how to, that he's mismanaged CVA or other veterans organizations he led before getting to CVA, that he didn't manage their finances, that left it in bad shape. Can you tell me about the state of the organization itself that you stepped into after Pete?
Yes, Concerned Veterans for America was a large grassroots organization with hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers all across the country. And Pete was able to organize these volunteers, which is not an easy thing to do, and fly them into Washington, have them meet with their elected officials to talk about VA policy. So that's one part of this story. The other is he put together a world-class executive team. And when I came into CVA, I didn't have to turn around the organization. I had to keep up with these guys. His executive team was world-class. I retained them. I leveraged them. And that was what set us up for success for those historic victories at the VA. So that's one part of the story. Also, let's talk about organizational management. Let's talk about the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
These guys won any wars for us? Have they passed any audits? So these guys who are a part of this club, this elite general officer club, they haven't exactly delivered. I think the American people deserve to have a junior officer like Pete Hegseth with 2 Bronze Stars, with a combat infantry badge. He's got the tenacity to go in there and shake things up. He's just like Donald Trump. President Trump was a disruptor, and I was able to see President Trump completely change the dynamic on the Korean Peninsula. I volunteered to serve during the height of the crisis with Kim Jong-un. And if President Trump would have listened to conventional wisdom, we would have most likely escalated into war. Pete Hegseth shares that disruptive mentality, and we desperately need him in the Pentagon.
Mark, did anybody from the New Yorker or the New York Times, various organizations, NBC News, who are writing these articles on Pete, did they ever reach out to you and what you know about Pete and Concerned Veterans for America?
The New Yorker did not reach out to me. And well, I'm not that hard of a guy to find. It's pretty easy when you search Concerned Veterans for America. I pop up right after Pete Hegseth's time. Nobody reached out to me, but I've been actively pursuing media sources or media outlets to set the record straight. So I've talked to the New York Times on record. I've talked to USA Today. I am willing to put my name and my face on this. I want people to know the real story about Pete Hegseth because he's an incredible leader. Will, you know him. I brought him to my home state of Iowa for the Iowa caucus. We live streamed together for Fox Nation. The Iowa grassroots, the caucus goers absolutely love Pete Hegseth. I introduced him to 2 young enlisted soldiers. Pete was able to cut it up with him. He was one of the guys. But also, not only does he have that grassroots ability, he's going to be able to go to the Pentagon with his academic pedigree, Harvard, Princeton. He's going to run circles around these general officers and these policy wonks from these Washington think tanks.
Did Mark, so you did end up speaking to the New York Times and USA Today. Did they run what you had to tell them about Pete?
One sentence was all they really ran. I talked to him for 20 or 30 minutes. Yeah.
Is that right? Okay, so the New York Times and USA Today talked to you for, you said, what, 20 to 30 minutes. They used one sentence for what you had to say. I know for a fact David Bellavia, who I think hired Pete, definitely worked with Pete at the Vets. It's terrible that I'm forgetting the Vets for Freedom. Vets for Freedom. They spoke to him for 20 minutes. NBC did. Used nothing from David Bellavia. By the way, you might want to use David Bellavia as a character witness because he won the Medal of Honor. No, they had nothing for him. NBC did not call Rachel Campos Duffy, who sat beside him on a couch, for 5 years, nor me, who sat beside him on a couch for 5 years in their character assassination of him. Instead, only used anonymous sources. So in multiple occasions here now on different types of attacks and stories, they either did not reach out or only published at best your one sentence. What does that tell you about what's going on with Pete?
It's a part of this new confirmation process that the Democrats want to run. They want to try to have Pete die on the vine. They want to try to crucify him in the media so he doesn't survive until January. Well, that didn't work. And the reason why they don't want to talk to guys like me who go on the record is because we're credible. And the accusations that are coming from anonymous sources, the mainstream media understands they will not hold up to scrutiny from the United States Senate during a confirmation process. But like Pete did in Iraq and Afghanistan, what I did as a platoon leader in Afghanistan, we want to set the conditions of the fight. I understand that the mainstream media is adversarial, but we're going on new media. We're going on podcasts like you will. We're going on these other channels that are reaching the grassroots, and our message is resonating. The Article 3 project, we experienced the largest growth in our grassroots over the last month because of our action center promoting Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel for FBI director. We are making a difference. We're going to continue to fight wherever we need to fight. I'll talk to the New York Times, USA Today. I'll talk to Democrat senators on Capitol Hill. But right now, Pete Hegseth is winning, and we've got to continue the fight.
I think you make an interesting, fascinating point as well about his ability to lead, competently, management. It's pretty rich to hear that criticism coming from an institution, either internally or even those watching it externally, that's failed 7 or 8 continuous in a row audits. Like, what is the level of competency that we're worried that we might not match going forward with the Pentagon? It's kind of like what Donald Trump says to African-American voters. He's like, hey, you might as well give it a shot because what are they doing for you after all this time? It's like, hey, when it comes to Pentagon, you might as well give Pete a shot because you're just getting missed audit after missed audit. I think it's 7, maybe 8 times. Last word to you, Mark.
I'd say that the United States of America and the world desperately needs Pete Hegseth to be our next Secretary of Defense. We live in one of the most uncertain times in world history. We see what's going on in Syria. Pete Hegseth, I've known him for over 10 years. We've served together in the military. He's got the character to lead our country. He's fully aligned with President Trump, and we can't get him confirmed soon enough.
All right. Mark Lucas took over CVA, Concerned Veterans for America, from Pete Hegseth. He's an Afghanistan vet. We appreciate his service, and we appreciate you being with us today here on the Will Cain Show. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Will.
All right. Before we go, guys in New York, I told you something about my face that makes me look maybe like a lib. So we've got another comment here that might help clarify. Okay. This is from Jeffrey Helton. He's on YouTube. He says, Will Cain is so polished looking. That's what makes him look like a liberal. Also, I can't think of him without thinking ESPN. So I assume that Jeffrey is saying that ESPN branding is affecting his view of me.
Didn't he have
I
a
think
beard
that's what
there?
he's saying.
Yeah.
Like, I had a beard at ESPN.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is pretty hipster.
That's another one. Is the beard lib or conservative at this point? Don't know. Hard to say.
It depends how thick
Well, I mean, you're
it is.
Brooklyn.
I think it
How
changed.
thick it is?
I think the beard changed hands. I think it really did.
Oh, it depends how deep the voice coming out of it is.
Yeah. No, I think the beard changed hands.
Wait, but 2 days I can't guess who's. You said it's changed hands, but I can't tell whose hands it's in right now. The beard.
I know.
What about the Ted Cruz beard?
The beard was a hipster thing. It has now come back around
Right.
to a non-lib thing, to a conservative thing. I think that's it. And now hipster is a little more clean cut. I think hipster's a little more clean cut now.
Trying to think about how I can rough it up. I did the beard for a while now,
Do a
but I don't think I'm
mustache.
going to bring the beard back.
I think it's more lib to think about it too much.
Wow.
To think about it too much?
Yeah, just do you.
Well, this is what I do. I
Keep it going.
analyze. I navel gaze. I think about things. I'm
it's
sorry.
time.
It's who I am.
Should go Top Gun mustache.
Joe.
And I will say, congratulations, Willisha. You got in my head today, and you made me think the entire show,
I
even
knew
when I'm
that
talking
would.
to a United States senator.
I knew that would.
All right, that's going to do it for us today here on The Will Cain Show. We'll be back here again tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern Time. Fox News YouTube, Fox News Facebook, foxnews.com. If you can't wait till then, go subscribe on Apple or Spotify and catch up. Until tomorrow on The Will Cain Show.